Paul, I'm going to read the communications into the record just so it will take me a minute to do that. Just
Okay.
so you are aware.
During the public hearing, right?
Correct. And then I also have the script.
Good. Okay, it's 6 o'clock and we have a quorum. So I call to order the November 21st meeting of the Mansfield, Connecticut Inland Wetlands Agency at 6 p.m. Members present are Aho, Corsi, Cooley, DeVivo, and Plant. And we have minutes from November 2nd to approve or disapprove. Anybody? I can't approve them by myself.
I will move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you, John. Moved by DeVivo.
Paul, I think part of the problem is that some of us were not at that meeting, so neither Sarah and I can second or even vote on this, actually.
All right. And I can second, right? Okay, I second it. So moved by DeVivo, second by Aho. All in favor? Hi, Katie. How you doing? So Katie Bertoni joined us at 6:01 p.m. And just in time to vote in favor of the minutes. That's what you voted in favor for, Katie, just in case you're wondering. Okay, thank you.
Of course, he
you watched
is
the video.
disqualified.
Okay, all right.
Cooley is also disqualified.
Okay, all right. So now we can start the public hearing. And this is a public hearing that has to do with application of CPH Mansfield LLC for a mixed-use automotive and restaurants at 106 Stores Road. And so I open the public hearing at 6:02 p.m. Members present are Aho, Accorsi, Cooley, DeVivo, Bertoni, and Plant. And we have things to read. We have a public hearing to read and also instructions to read.
So I have a sort of the information regarding the public hearing. So as a reminder to all participants, including members and staff, please state your name before speaking. For those viewing at home on live stream, please understand that there's a 1 to 2 minute time lag due to transmission delays. If you will be providing verbal testimony during the public hearing, you can call into the meeting at any time. We will take a few minutes after the applicant's presentation to give people time to call in. Guidelines for the public hearing. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to receive relevant information about the proposed application from the public. Order and decorum shall be maintained at all times during the hearings. The agency reserves the right to adjourn the hearing to another date and time if discussion becomes unruly and unmanageable. Given the virtual format, we ask that everyone bear with us if we encounter any glitches. If we are unable to overcome technical issues or the agency is having difficulty understanding information presented in this format, the hearing will be continued to another meeting. So the order of presentations is as follows. The applicant will go first, then there will be public comment and support, then in opposition, and then undetermined or requests for additional information. When the public is addressing the commission, please state your name and address for the record before beginning your comments. Limit your comments to the subject of the public hearing. Avoid repetition where possible. Summarize reports and letters that are submitted to the commission rather than reading them aloud, as all written information is copied and distributed to members. Direct all questions and comments to the chair. Do not attempt to engage in dialogue with members of the commission, staff, or any other parties to the hearing. Speak clearly to ensure your comments are audible to members of the public watching from home and are recorded. Commission members may ask questions of anyone providing testimony, but will not discuss the relevant merits, the relative merits of the application until the hearing is closed. Failure to abide by these policies and procedures may result in a muting of your microphone or dismissal from the hearing. So participant instructions are as follows. Instructions on how to participate in the public hearing are listed on the agenda. For those who would like to call in, please call 1-929-205-6099 and enter the following meeting ID, 834-2309-4831, and the following passcode, 330794. Again, the phone number is 1-929-205-6099. Enter meeting ID 834-2309-4831 and passcode 330794. Let's see, I will read the public hearing for the record. The legal notice rather, for the record. The following legal notice was published in the Willamette Chronicle on 11/12/22 and 11/17/2022. The Mansfield Inland Wetlands Agency will hold the following public hearing on Monday, November 21st, 2022 via web-based virtual meeting to hear comments regarding the following application. 6:00 p.m. W1625 CPH Mansfield LLC for an inland wetlands license for regulated activities associated with a mixed-use automotive sales and service office and restaurants at 106 Stores Road, Assessor's Parcel ID 38.109.38. No information from the public shall be received after the close of the public hearing. Additional information regarding this application is available in the planning office. Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned before, there are a number of communications that I'd like to just note for the record. The first is the application with attachments that was initially submitted. You have site plans revised through 8/26/22, and then site plans revised through 10/24/22. There are erosion and control sheets submitted on 11/11/22, a detail sheet submitted on 11/11/22, overall site plan sheet submitted on 11/11/22, landscape sheets submitted on 11/11/22. The technical reports are the wetland evaluation report, a stormwater management report revised through 8/26/22, the NDDB application and response, stormwater management plan revised to 10/24/22, nutrient loading calculations submitted on 11/11/22, flow splitter manhole calculations submitted on 11/11/22, stormwater management report revised to 11/11/22, stormwater routing diagram proposed submitted on 11/11/22. You also have a number of staff comments and comments from your peer reviewers and applicant responses. Trink House LLC comments dated 11/1/2022. Applicant response to Derek Delay dated 8/26/2022. Steve Trinkhouse comments dated 8/5/2022. Steve Trinkhouse LLC comments dated 9/19/2022. JMM Wetland Consultants Report dated 9/30/2022. Applicant response to Trinkhouse dated 10/24/22. Applicant response to the 9/30 wetlands comments dated 10/24/2022. BL summary response of items dated 11/11/22. Trinkhouse comments dated 11/14/22. And then you also have the Conservation Commission minutes of 11/16/2022 that speak to this application. So with that, I think That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. We can move on to the applicant. Who's going to be presenting for the applicant tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That will be me. My
Okay.
name's Dory Famigletti. I'm an attorney at Kahan, Kerensky, and Capicella. I'm representing the applicant tonight, and I do have a team with me that's going to be primarily led by Matt Bruton from BL. He's our engineer. We also have a few other engineers and architects and landscape architects from BL that will chime in as necessary to answer questions. And I believe Eric Davidson, our wetlands scientist, will be joining the call, I hope momentarily. But we're going to get started because Matt and I can start taking you through the application at this point. The property, before I turn it over, which you're probably familiar with, let me back up a little bit. This is a revised application. About a year ago or so, you saw another application for this site. That application was withdrawn. We needed to do a full vernal pool study, which we couldn't do until the spring. So we had filed previous to that. So we ran out of time. And in the interim, our tenancies changed. So the building changed a little bit. You'll hear some references to a prior plan. That prior plan had 4 potential or possible leasable space units in the proposed new building, whereas now we have 3, but we'll get into that site detail in a little bit. There are also a number of additional changes to the drainage system and that sort of thing, which again, Matt will take you through. But the site at 106 Stores Road, it's just over 5 acres. It's in a PB1 zone. Just to orient you all, it is on the east side of 195. It's between the McDonald's and the Staples Plaza, and across the street from the signalized entrance to the Eastbrook Mall. Because this is a wetlands application and public hearing, we did have to send notice to the abutters, that both the direct abutters and those across the street. I did submit the green cards to the planning office, so Jennifer should have those. The site is, as a note, and this is really more for when we get to the zoning, but we did also send notice to all abutters within 500 feet for the special permit application as required by the zoning regs. The site is owned by Champagne Toy Store LLC. They've consented to the filing of this application. And they are the owners and current operators of the existing car dealership and repair and auto body repair facility that's operating right now on the property. We are proposing to modify the existing building, which is about 20,000 square feet, by reducing it by around 8,000 square feet, and then adding a 3-unit mixed use commercial building on the southerly part of the site. And that new building is going to have about 8,500 square feet of leasable space in it. 2 of the units in our new building will be for restaurant use, one having a limited service drive-through window, which we'll talk more about when we get to the zoning hearing, and one will be used for a medical or dental office. We are not proposing to subdivide the property. We are proposing to condominiumize it, leaving the underlying land intact and just creating 2 separate and distinct condominium units. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the zoning process as well, the zoning hearing. But if you hear us refer to units 1 and 2, unit 1 is the proposed new building on the southerly end of the site, and unit 2 is the modified car dealership building on the northerly part of the site. Wetlands have been field identified along our easterly side of the property line and abutting our easterly property line. Mr. Davidson has delineated those, and he'll speak to that and the functions and values and impacts when he gets on the line. The application, as Jennifer Kaufman has noted, has been reviewed by the Conservation Commission. They did recommend an approval with recommendations, which we'll go through, if you don't mind, as we do the presentation and as we come to each component and each recommendation as it works into our presentation, we'll address it there. And it was also reviewed by Traffic Authority, but we'll talk about that again when we get to the zoning hearing. And it's also been extensively reviewed by your town staff and the peer reviewers that you selected, and reference to those reports and response letters were noted by Jennifer Kaufman under the correspondence. I do believe at this time we've got a complete wetlands application, and I believe all the wetlands issues have really been identified. There's one issue that we want to talk about you with. It's a recommendation of the Conservation Commission. Again, we'll get to as we move through the presentation. We'd like your final decision on that. Conservation is advisory to you, and we do think that there's just some discussion to be had about that specific issue having to do with the addition of a wet swale that we want to review with you before we were to add that to the plans. So having said all of that, Matt, I'd like to turn it over to you, and I'll have you please do an overview of the proposed site improvements. And I'm hoping that you'll share your screen with us so you, as you're walking us through it, we can see it visually as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Laura. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, great. I will share my screen real quick here. All right. So for the record, my name is Matthew Bruton. I'm a professional engineer from BL Companies out of our Hartford, Connecticut office. I'll walk you through, as Dory said, kind of the existing conditions and move over to proposed conditions, and then use some of my coworkers and other professionals here to help answer any questions you guys may have. So just starting off here with Google. Can everybody see that? Yes, okay. All right, so I'm sure all of you are aware, a lot of IWA met on site in the past couple of months, walked the site. So this is the Champagne Motors site. So existing is about a little over 5 acres, currently occupied by Champagne Motors, as Dory said, around 20,000 square feet. There's a single access drive to Route 195. Abutters, obviously, McDonald's to the north, Eastbrook Mall to the west here, along with the road. To the south is a shopping plaza that has, Petco, Staples, and a restaurant. And then to the east is where we hit our wetlands, and then obviously a residential Riverview Road as well. Topography in general slopes from the road to the rear of the lot. So just to give you guys a street view. So everything, obviously the road is higher and the rear of the lot towards the wetlands is lower. And the biggest topography change, obviously you can see most of the developed portion of the lot currently is relatively flat. The biggest topography change is close to the development next to the Staples Plaza. So the topography changes from around 175 in the front to around 163 in the rear. I'm going to switch over to another plan here, since I know you guys are familiar with the Google Street View. So same orientation, road across the bottom in here in yellow, and then building, I'm just going to highlight real quickly in red. Building is roughly here. So Staples is here, McDonald's to this side. So the wetlands as identified by Eric Davison, I'm going to trace here in green. So it's towards the rear of our lot. And as you can tell, I'll just do another color here as well. This is the rear of our property line here in blue. So as Dory kind of mentioned it, as you can see here visually, the majority of the wetlands are off the property. These actually fall on some of the residential butters on Riverview, but it does come onto our property in this northeast corner. I think I'm going to leave that at that for existing conditions, and I'll move forward to proposed conditions, and then I'll pass to Eric. Okay, so proposed conditions. Obviously, as Dory mentioned, Champagne Motors is still going to operate on the site, but they can do so with less space. So our goal is to be able to demolish a portion of their facility to create room for the new redevelopment, which is on the south side. I'll just highlight this up real quickly for you. So around 8,000 square feet is being demolished, with around 12,000 square foot remaining, to give you guys just a scale of where the demolished portion is. Roughly dotted out in red there, that's the portion that will be demolished. And this portion is the portion of Champagne Motors that will remain. As I said, still providing the same sales and service to their customers now, just in a smaller, kind of more compact area. So there's currently one driveway, as I mentioned, to the property. It's right here. That driveway will remain and be dedicated to Champagne Motors. We've obviously reconfigured their parking lot to leave this driveway in place and deal with the remaining portion of their building. So as you can see here in this kind of hatched gray area, we are providing some pavement area for the parking along the front, and then a circulation drive along the side of their building. So emergency services and functionality of their own building, they can circulate completely. On the other side, the redevelopment side on the south side, we're, as Dory mentioned, looking to provide a mixed-use development with 3 tenants, 2 restaurant and 1 dental office. They'd access, they have a new driveway being added. This is a signalized intersection that currently exists across from the Eastbrook Mall. So we'd be looking to modify this signal to provide a 4th leg of that intersection with this driveway where my hand is floating now. Just highlight that quickly in this area here. There would be some off-site improvements associated with this. Obviously, we've shown some of them on the plan here to see. So there's obviously existing lanes, turn lanes, crosswalks, and some improvements associated with that. Since this is a DOT road, we do need to go through the DOT process for them to review the signal design and some of these off-site improvements. That process is currently overlapping with this local approval process. They won't issue any final determinations until we're approved locally, which I'm sure you're aware. So I'm going to just move back through the site here. So along with the off-site improvements associated with the mixed-use development, we're also proposing frontage sidewalks along the road as well. There aren't sidewalks in front of McDonald's or Staples, but we're hoping for the first domino to fall to increase the walkability of this area. So as you can see, I've highlighted those in blue. Along with those in the right of way, we've also made connections directly to the front doors of both businesses. So it's not just going to be an isolated section of sidewalk, but they also can safely traverse right to the building. This will obviously play in with the crosswalk across Storage Road here as well. In addition to that, I'll just circle a couple other things on site. We do have handicap parking spaces for Champagne Motors, and also for the mixed-use development, obviously appropriately placed for ADA requirements at the front of the building. The mixed-use development as well, considering it does have an office, dental office and restaurant, we've also provided patio areas here and here, and a bike rack as well. So that does accommodate and reflect the businesses that are going to be moving into the southern part of the site. As well, I'd like to point out the queue for the pickup window will go around the building, and the window is placed approximately on the northern side here. I'll just highlight that area here. We do have a loading area to the rear, and then 2 new dumpster locations for this new development. As you can see, the majority of the parking on this is in the front of the building here, with some on the side and a little to the rear. Champagne, again, a little along the frontage of the road, most of the side, and then a lot of parking to the rear of the facility here. I'll just move forward through grading and drainage. So obviously we're increasing the impervious area to the site with some of the redevelopment to fit the new development. The existing site, the Champagne Motors, as it stands today, has a very limited stormwater management system. It's basically catch basins and some piping that directly discharge to the wetlands in the rear. The main avenue for this is a pipe trace here in blue that discharges directly to the wetlands. There is a small portion of the site that is captured in a catch basin here and goes to the DOT road. So obviously we're looking to make some significant improvements to the site in terms of stormwater management. So we did that with the guidance of town regulations, 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Manual, and 2002 Erosion and Sedimentation Control Guidelines. So I'll kind of just break this into 2 real quick, just to give you a breakdown. So on the Champagne Motor side, we're doing to retrofit the existing system. Some existing catch basins and piping will remain, but we're adding additional catch basins with deep sumps and hoods. We're adding offline hydrodynamic separators and subsurface detention and infiltration systems. The goal obviously is to maintain that discharge pipe to the wetlands, but the water discharging from the side of the site will be significantly improved to the wetlands. On the retail side, the restaurant side, to the south here, we have a little bit more flexibility. We're filling in this site to increase the finished elevations of it to match up with the existing intersection, signalized intersection with the Eastbrook Mall. But overall, same design features to hit the regulations. Be a brand new system. We'll have start off with catch basins with deep substance hoods. We have offline hydrodynamic separators, and we have subsurface infiltration systems. Overall, matching existing drainage patterns. A portion of this site, as I mentioned, goes to the front. So we have a small portion that does go to DOT, but the majority of this lot as well, combining with Champagne Motors, does discharge to the wetlands, which is what we're looking for to maintain existing drainage patterns. Site was evaluated for the 1, 2, 10, 25, and 100-year events, matching overall drainage patterns, providing water quality improvements, and we're mitigating peak flow off site. Your regulations call for the 2-year storm. It has to be reduced to less than the pre-development 1-year storm, and we've done that here. Next, I'll move along is to site utilities. We're jumping around a little bit. So everything is available either on site or in the street. So water, sanitary, gas, electric, and telephone. So obviously the new building would receive all brand new services, and then we'd be retrofitting a little bit of the existing services going to Champagne Motors since the configuration of the building is changing slightly. Move forward to erosion and sedimentation control. So obviously, during the construction where there's earthwork happening, we want to make sure we're protecting the site, the abutters, the roadway, and especially the wetlands. So we do have an erosion and sedimentation control plan depicted here that we want the contractors to follow before they put one shovel in the ground. And this plan should be maintained and monitored throughout the life of construction until it's satisfied to town staff and ourselves that the site is stabilized and some of these devices can be removed. Just a quick highlight of some of these things. We have construction entrances, we have silt sacks, we have silt fences, we have erosion control blankets, we have soil stockpile areas. And the goal obviously is all these devices is to capture any sediment from mitigating off site to be a detriment to, again, a butters, wetlands, or roadway. Move forward here to the landscaping. So obviously we want to make sure that we're complying with your regulations, but also making sure the site is aesthetically pleasing and beautiful to not only the owners of the property, but to visitors and to people just passing by. So we do have a landscape plan depicting what we're trying to do here. So that includes improvements to both sides of the property. So Champagne Motors as well, you can see we're making improvements with the sidewalk addition, but also reseeding and planting street trees along this area. There's not much of anything there today. And then towards the rear where there's a reconfiguration and additional parking being added, obviously there's landscape islands that are being filled with trees and shrubs and grasses as necessary in the rear here as well. On the mixed-use development side, similar thing. We're having a variety of trees and shrubs along the frontage of the property, adjacent to the proposed sidewalk. And as you come into the site, there's a variety of landscaped islands, different orientations and sizes and sidewalks that are also being landscaped to enhance the experience in the site. This includes some landscaped islands and things around adjacent to the building as well, and obviously the perimeter of the site as well. The goal is obviously to limit the limit of disturbance, and I'm just going to trace this here roughly in green to make sure that we maintain as much of the existing mature trees to the rear of the lot as possible. So anything that scribbling and highlighting in green here is the existing tree line that is outside of our limit of disturbance, which will remain. We think it's good for obviously the functions of the wetland, but also as a good natural buffer to the residents to the rear on Riverview. In addition to that, we also do have retaining walls and fences along the rear of the parking lot here as well, which will also aid in a good demarcation between the wetlands and again to the abutters to the east there. Let me think here, make sure I didn't miss anything. In general, from an earthwork excavation standpoint, the majority of the front of Champagne Motors isn't changing dramatically. There is some fill being brought in for the rear of Champagne Motors, and on the mixed use side, approximately 15,000 cubic feet of fill. As I mentioned before, obviously that site is quite low compared to the traffic intersection there. So the goal is to raise that site a few feet to be able to make that an appropriately safe entrance and exit for the new business. In terms of truck access, obviously to a certain degree, they'll be using the existing driveway entrance, which is paved. And then when the new entrance is constructed, they will have 2 points of access along with the light to get onto the site. Dory, did I miss anything else you wanted me to go
No,
over?
I think that was a pretty good overview, Matt. Obviously, if the commission has any questions about site improvements, we can entertain those now. Well, let me pause for a second. If there are any questions by commission members about proposed site improvements, please feel free to, yes, I see at least one hand.
Can you, could you kind of highlight where the change is happening? Like where undeveloped land is being developed? Is it possible
Absolutely,
to do
great
that?
question.
Yeah.
I can, yep. So let me just pick a nice color here. So the existing pavement line of Champagne Motors is approximately here. So anything here is new, anything here is existing.
Thank you.
Thanks. I don't know if there's any other commission questions about the site, but if there are, it doesn't chime in. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I see
Hi. Yeah, this is Luann Cooley. My question is, there's quite a bit of additional pavement, and so we're raising the impervious pavement of this site quite a bit. Has there been any consideration about using any kind of permeable concrete, permeable asphalt, or permeable paving system in areas where that would be appropriate?
Do you want me
Yeah,
to-
great question. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Dory, you can start.
Well, that's a good question. And it's also something that was raised, I believe, by the Conservation Commission, which Matt can speak to a little bit. But Conservation Commission noted also the increase in impervious area. And did mention a concern with the additional disturbance in the upland review area. Now, two things to keep in mind with that. If we're doing activity in the upland review area, that is permissible as long as there's no corresponding direct impact, as you know, on the wetlands themselves. And I think that we've been able to design this at this point to the technical reviewer's satisfaction that there are no adverse impacts on the wetlands per se. So the activity within the upland review area would appear to be completely permissible under your regulations. With regard to the impervious area and the increase there, we are still compliant with the zoning regulations, but we do acknowledge that there is an increase in impervious area. Conservation Commission, as one of their conditions, did ask us to consider potentially using pervious pavers in those new back parking areas. Those two new are those both new, Matt? Both of those areas to the rear of the existing Champagne building?
Yes.
Yep.
This area here and this area here are new for storage of Champagne's vehicles.
So they would be inventory storage areas, not where customers are parking, but inventory storage areas. So Conservation
Correct.
Commission did request that we consider that. Their primary concern, though, really seemed to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, because I wasn't there and I was just reading the minutes and discussing it subsequently with you, but their primary concern seemed to be just the general disturbance within the upland review area and trying to minimize that. Not so much any attenuation of stormwater and proper management of drainage, which is probably why you would see the pervious pavement be utilized. So if we're going to put the parking fields there for the inventory storage, that area is going to be disturbed in the upland review regardless, right? That's going to be, whether it's pervious pavement or impervious, there's going to be a disturbance there. And if Conservation Commission was just concerned about overall disturbance, then using pervious pavers isn't going to make much of a difference whatsoever. So it does add not only a cost to construction, but it also adds a maintenance obligation, because you have to treat those surfaces much differently than you would an impervious, just typical paved surface. So we didn't really think it was necessary, because we think, provide for that construction within the upland review area without any adverse impact on the wetlands. And we didn't need the pervious pavement to accommodate our drainage system, which we've adequately designed to meet all state and local standards with the system that Matt's already described. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, my concern actually is more with the increase in runoff, because even with your new system, as climate change is increasing our precipitation, which is well documented in Connecticut, and I realize that you're meeting our regulations as they are written and the stormwater regulations as they are written. But in this system, you're looking at one direct drainage directly into the wetlands, so that additional stormwater increase from that parking lot is of a concern, I think, that we should consider.
Okay, Matt, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just two points. Yeah, so the this additional area here that change closer. Yeah, so this area here, the additional storage for this lot that I circled is at grade. So if you walked on the site today, for the most part, it's basically an extension of the existing parking lot. We did test pits out there at the request of the peer reviewer, and groundwater is very high, which unsurprising given the adjacent wetlands, right? That makes sense. So pervious pavement in this area, I'd be a little bit hesitant to install in this area, given the fact that infiltration would be highly unlikely. Especially with this being a car dealership. I'd rather capture it and treat it through the structural methods that we have to make sure that, obviously this place is selling cars, used cars, and anything that comes off of those, I want to make sure it's captured and cleaned before it goes to the wetlands. This area here is actually being elevated, so we are actually providing an infiltration system to allow us to, recharge groundwater prior, and capture water quality volumes before the excess is discharged to the wetlands. So we're able to do that in this case because we're changing the grades here. I don't think we're completely opposed to it, but just from a maintenance standpoint and the fact that we do have a system that does comply with regulations, we kind of picking between two evils here with in terms of groundwater separation and also getting a system that we're confident that can be used and maintained properly. I know pervious pavement is not as common for a lot of these landowners to maintain,
Sure,
especially
thank
for
you.
this type of use.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. But your comment also about it being at grade and with high groundwater, I'd really like to hear your discussion about why you don't think the wetland swale would be necessary, because it seems like that would be another way of dealing with the exact issues we've just been discussing.
You're talking about the recommendation from Concom about the wetland swale that would go in this area? Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, yep. So
Matt, I see that Eric
only...
Davison has joined us. Do you think that it would be, I'm sorry, we will absolutely answer that question, but I was just wondering if now that he's joined us, if it would be helpful for him to talk a little bit about the resources out there. And then I know that he also joined you in that discussion with the Conservation Commission at the meeting last week. So perhaps we could have him address that as well.
Let's have him do his and then answer the question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
And then we'll come right back to that question. Thanks. With that, Eric, if you wouldn't mind jumping in, maybe talking a bit about, Matt's done such a good job outlining the existing improvements on the site and the proposed development plan. If you could talk a bit about your field delineation, what we have out there on site, their functions and values, and your impact assessment would be helpful.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm so sorry I'm late. I got so used to the 7 o'clock meeting that I didn't see that this was a 6 o'clock, so my apologies. Do you want me to just, let me give you the overview and then let me know if you have additional questions. So there's a single wetland on the site. It borders the eastern side of the site, as I'm sure Matt described. Only the northwest corner of the site has the wetland actually on the parcel itself. As you can see from the mapping that Matt has up in front of you with the green line, the wetland quickly trails off site. It's a forested wetland. It does have an embedded pond, a historic pond that's now been drained and is in a wooded condition. That pond is just off of the southeast site corner boundary. Yeah, thanks, Matt. That right there is an old pond, and there's some pictures of the pond in my report. Everything that entire wetland drains south into the pond. There's an old earthen berm that used to retain the water in the pond that has since breached. So the pond's in what we would call a flow-through condition, meaning simply that the water, when there's a lot of rain and a lot of surface water moving through it, it just moves right through the pond and out the outlet. It has about, varying levels of water depending on the season, but generally 1 to 2 feet of water. It's pretty shallow. It has a huge sediment delta in it, mostly from just what's naturally eroded in from the wetland to the north, but also there's quite a bit of sediment that's built up in there from the pipe outlet that exists on the property and discharges stormwater to the site wetlands. We noted at that stormwater outfall, there's quite a bit of sediment, which just looks like winter road sand, but over the years has kind of discharged and filled up that wetland channel that feeds the pond. And then at the northern end of the pond, there's a big sediment delta that you can see in my photograph. And photograph number 5 in my report shows that sediment delta that occupies the northern side of the pond. So a lot of sediment discharge from that pipe. As you go south beyond the pond, this is a large wetland system that goes south to the north side of Route 6 and also to the east. If you look at the figures in my report, particularly figure 2 of my report, you can see that larger landscape and shows that wetland as it goes south. And Matt, you can kind of see it on the screen there that Matt's showing on the north side of Route 6. You can see that wetland, how it trails down into a wooded area on the north side of Route 6. Ultimately, everything does drain to the Natchog River. It goes south to a wetland area just along the I guess that's the westbound side of Route 6. And at that point, it drains into a pipe and then drains into the Natchog River on the south side of the highway. Again, yeah, the wetland's forested. It's a pretty typical forested wetland condition, typical vegetation. We did do a deeper dive into the pond vegetation, and we have a description of that in my report, along with a species list of what was observed in the pond for aquatic vegetation and emergent vegetation, and also for what is bordering the perimeter of the pond. It does have aquatic vegetation, meaning plants that grow underwater and require permanent ponding. So we know it's permanently flooded. When we did our vernal pool survey, well, let me just back up. When we did our initial wetland delineation, we did a preliminary report, and we noted that with respect to vernal pools, that the pond itself couldn't be ruled out as a potential vernal pool. It certainly isn't your classic vernal pool with seasonally flooded hydrology. As I said, it's permanently flooded, but sometimes in these small wooded ponds, you can have productive vernal pools even if they're permanently flooded. So that prompted us sort of waiting until we had a spring available to do a full vernal pool survey, which we did this past spring. You can see a description of the vernal pool survey that I did and the dates that we were out there in March, April, and May to survey the pond. We did not find any vernal pool activity in the wetlands on the site or east of the site or in the pond. We did observe one vernal pool in that wetland complex that is north of Route 6. During one of our surveys, we were out during the period in which wood frogs, which are an indicator species, were chorusing, just listening by the on-site wetlands, not hearing anything, but could hear a wood frog chorusing in the distance. So I tracked that down into that wetland that's to the south and west of the site. So it would be north of Route 6 and west of the Natchog River. It was just a single adult male chorusing at that time, but where I found it led me to, on the subsequent visit, led me to the breeding pool. And that's, that area is mapped in my report. Let me just see, that's figure 3 of my report. You can see the limits of the vernal pool. And then I included some measurements relative to the site. It's 585 feet southwest of the closest point of the site. So it's a significant distance from the site. In terms of wetland functions and values, because it's a wetland that has some varied hydrology with saturated to permanently flooded, we noted groundwater recharge discharge as a principal function. Probably the most significant principal function we noted was flood flow alteration. The wetland is large in size, especially when you account for the contiguous wetland that continues to the south. It's a large wetland, has very depressed topography, has a large water holding capacity, and it receives runoff from urban areas, areas of high impervious surface cover, and it drains directly to the Natchog River. So that's to me is a critical function. In a period when you have a rain event, you get a lot of surface water runoff from all this developed area, rather than it just flowing quickly into the Natchog River. You get some desynchronization of that velocity and that flow. By discharging it to this wetland, the wetland is clearly removing some sediment. As that velocity slows, that sediment's dropping out in that wetland, especially in the old pond. And then, cleaner, slower flowing water is slowly trickling through the whole system and then reaching the Natchog River. So it does a good job in sort of providing some water quality function and flood flow function, and protecting discharge, protecting the quality, or improving the quality, I should say, of the water that discharges to the Natchog River. So that was the other function, was sediment toxicant pathogen retention or nutrient removal, because it is taking stormwater and essentially treating it before it reaches the Natchog River. So we see a somewhat degraded condition in the on-site wetland from that untreated stormwater discharge into the wetland, but it is protecting downstream resources by promoting that function. That's the quick overview. I hope it wasn't too quick. I can certainly elaborate on any parts of that you need me to.
Maybe you can answer the swale question now.
No problem. Let me
The
go.
question of whether, is that, you want Matt to answer that, or for me to talk about?
Yeah, I can answer that, Eric. So let me just go back to the plan here. So Mr. Chairman, Ms. Cooley, right? So we have, I'll just zoom in here. It's just so the system here in yellow, currently we show discharging here, which would then obviously end up in this area here, which is the existing drainage system. So we're trying to maintain that drainage system. The alternative that was recommended by the peer review engineer was, I didn't change the color of that, was to keep the same system that we have in terms of the offline separators, the subsurface infiltration, but to discharge that through this wall and then have a wet swale along the base of our retaining wall. The retaining wall is the dark line here you see that I'm tracing with the plan, to again get it to discharge to the same location over here as well. Our only hesitation with that is the limit of disturbance, which I'll just trace here. I'll change that color for you. Our previous conversations with town staff and with many of you on site during the site visits months ago was obviously to minimize intrusion towards the wetlands into the upland review area. So we were trying to minimize and maintain as much of the existing tree cover that was there today, the mature tree. So that was really our only hesitation is we think we need to cut down more trees to then put in a swale. At the time of Conservation Commission last week, they obviously, when we left that meeting, they were recommending that we put that in as well. Since that meeting, and this hasn't been shown widely, but we wanted to show it to you today, is we blasted in this swale on where it would need to go to get that wet swale from the discharge. And this is a very flat area, so we do need to berm to a certain degree. You can see the prior limited disturbance is here, and the red lines depict the new work. Limited disturbance is approximately there. So it's a significant increase in the cutting of the trees, which removes that natural buffer to the wetland and also to the residents on Riverview. So we feel like our system is adequate to meet your regulations and provide that water quality discharge to the wetlands. The wet swale would be kind of a belt and suspenders. We were making that decision to, leave it up to the Conservation Commission and you guys and whether you want us to do that. We are happy to do it if you want to. Just want to let you know that there's going to be an increase to the disturbance of the upland review area to install that wet swale.
Okay.
Picking up on that, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm picking up on that. This is one of those unique instances where you have to look at the different hats that you're wearing. And I know this is a combined Wetlands Commission and Planning and Zoning Commission. From a wetlands functionality point, again, as Matt stated, we do think that we satisfy the regulations and we are providing adequate stormwater management and renovation of stormwater. But it is something that is feasible from a wetlands perspective. It would, however, when you put your planning and zoning hat on, be further intrusion and cutting into the existing vegetated buffer and just pulling some activity closer to the wetlands line and the rear property line. And if we're concerned about providing as much buffer as possible in between the developed area and the residences to the east, that's a little bit of a conflict. So we thought it best to come to you as the commission for that final determination. I believe that our experts are telling us it's not necessary to add that swale in order to satisfy the regulations and provide the renovation of the stormwater and the control of the stormwater. So it's not necessary to meet the regulations, but could you go beyond the regulations and require it from a wetlands perspective? That's really your call. And does the further intrusion into the buffer warrant it in your estimation? So guidance from you would be very helpful on this.
Well, trying to keep my planning and zoning hat on at the same time as the inland wetlands hat. If we didn't have to get rid of that tree buffer, then the swale might be a great idea. But I think that tree buffer is an important thing to maintain.
So I think, Mr. Chairman, I think this is Jennifer Kaufman. Right now, it's a balancing act, but I just want to make sure that the Inland Wetlands Agency is acting as the Inland Wetlands Agency right now and not the Planning and Zoning Commission. So, I mean, I think your charge with the Inland Wetlands as the Inland Wetlands Agency is to ensure that a development has no significant impact to wetlands and water courses. And so because it's sort of a broader charge, there's more flexibility in how that is, and how you accomplish that. So it might be appropriate right now to hear from Eric Davison and then your peer review wetland scientist, Jim McManus, to kind of have them share what they think are the, sort of the pluses and minuses of all this. So, but that's at your discretion.
Okay. Can we do that relatively briefly without spending the entire night on this swale question?
You want me to weigh in, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, yes.
Yep. Why don't we start with you, Eric, and then we can turn it over to Jim.
Sure. Yeah. So I know there's some, I want to say disagreement, but there's some difference in the efficiency of the swale and the existing system that's being proposed between BL and Steve Trinkus, and we talked about that a bit at the Conservation Commission hearing, so I'll leave that to the engineers. But and Steve Trinkus can stop me if I'm incorrect, but I think the main goal of this system being recommended by Steve Trinkus is removal of nitrogen and phosphorus, which these subsurface structural systems don't do a great job of. So I do think any opportunity to remove nitrogen and phosphorus to the maximum extent possible is a benefit to the wetland, because we know that that can impact wetlands in a number of ways, particularly nitrogen. I think the talking about the balancing act of that, I did question, and I am curious about, typically this type of proposed use doesn't have significantly high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus. I feel like those tend to be associated more with residential uses or areas where you get a lot of treatment of lawns and landscaping with fertilizers and such. So I'm not sure what the how significant this improvement is if the levels of nitrogen and phosphorus on the site aren't going to be all that significant. And this proposed system is an improvement over what's there now, because there is no on-site treatment. In terms of whether it's better to leave a wooded buffer versus converting it to a swale, at the end of the day, if you did construct a swale and it was all vegetated and stabilized, it would be green space like a forested buffer. Forest cover is generally better for as a buffer around a forested wetland than open canopy. But all of the regulations and all of the work that you're doing and we try to do is that the purpose of protecting a wetland buffer is to improve the function of the wetland. If the swale improves the function of the wetland by improving the quality that discharges to the wetland, then that's not a bad use of the buffer, even if it requires some tree clearing. So if it were me, I would focus in on how high are these nutrient levels going to be and what's being gained. I think that's something to ask the engineers.
Okay, so let's hear from an engineer then. Jennifer, who's our next victim?
I don't know if it might be appropriate to talk to hear from Jim McManus, your peer reviewer, the
Sure.
wetland scientist, just to.
All right.
Good evening, all. Jim McManus, Certified Professional Soil Scientist, JMM Wetland Consulting Services, offices in Newtown. Eric kind of laid it out pretty nicely. I mean, I'm a fan of above ground. I mean, infiltration does a nice job, but also if you can incorporate above ground, why not? One thing that hasn't been mentioned is the buffer itself is on the site is disturbed. Fill piles, miscellaneous soil disturbances. The understory is all invasive shrubs. The overstory is less than a valued tree canopy. So in my opinion, if you're gonna have to lose some tree canopy to add in an above ground mitigation strategy or BMP, and in this particular site, they don't always work, but this particular site, I'm saying, why not? And I'm gonna let the engineers battle on how wide it needs to be. I know at the Conservation Commission, the swale was talked about being much, much smaller. Actually, you could, according to Steve Trinkus, you could actually potentially put the whole swale inside the wall in the existing limit of disturbance. Now, they'll let those guys battle out if they can build it or not. But even if we have to, I don't think we need to build it as big as shown. I think that's way overkill. This is just supposed to be a small little swale that's going to help attenuate nutrients and anything else that might be in the stormwater runoff before it hits the wetlands. It does not need to be this humongous swale, which is shown. Anyways, having said that, I'll let the engineers battle it out. Thank you.
Matt, can you talk
Oh.
at all about why you designed it like this, or skip? I know this isn't a
Yeah,
final
absolutely.
design, and we haven't had
Yeah.
a chance to share it with peer reviewers and town staff yet. We're just showing it for the first time tonight, but perhaps you can discuss
Sure.
what went into it, and then we can get some preliminary comments from peer review and go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So just want to make it clear, not looking to battle over this whatsoever. We're happy to install it if the commission sees that it's fit. We've designed this to accept the flow of the outfall from the system, the area that goes to it. So it needs to be a certain width. We've roughly done those calculations to show that here. I know that the discussion on COMCOM last week was talking about hopefully maybe able to fit it within the existing limit of disturbance. We think it needs to be larger than that, and that's kind of what's shown here. There's also the issue of constructability, right? You're not going to have someone out there with a shovel digging this; you'll have a bulldozer, right? So there's a little bit of constructability and how skinny or wide this can be from a constructability standpoint. So we're happy to share this with peer reviewers, after this meeting for them to verify. But again, happy to include it if you guys think so. We just thought we were striking a balance of saving trees versus adding a swale. And I do say that we did do nutrient calculations at the request of the peer review engineers. Let me see if we just open up that quickly just to go over that high level. Let me see that here. So there are, with the system that is shown today without the wetland swale, there are reductions for some of the nutrients that we're concerned with by peer reviewers. I will say that the values that we used for our system in terms of the infiltration system, we used a very conservative number that the peer reviewer wanted to count as credit for cleaning of this stormwater. We think we have other resources that say that the removal efficiency of some of these nutrients is higher. So we think this is, very conservative, but as Eric mentioned, we are making a drastic improvement to a site that has really no stormwater management system to date. So again, don't want to battle. I know there's a lot to talk about on a project like this, but we think it's adequate. We're saving trees, but we're happy to add if that's the desire of the commission.
Okay, can we get a comment from our peer reviewer?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve Trinkus, I'm a licensed professional engineer from Southbury and was retained by the land use office along with Jim to review the application. I have a lot of expertise in LID or low impact development, which is the focus on water quality. The swale I recommended not only to the Conservation Commission, but also in my letter of November 14th, would have the swale located between the retaining wall and the limit of disturbance. There's about 9 feet in there. I was recommending a swale width of 4 feet, perhaps a foot deep with 3-to-1 side slopes. But I said it had to be sized per the DEP manual for a 10-year storm event. And it's a fairly limited drainage area that comes out to this rear system. So I did state at conservation that it could be 6-8 inches deep. It didn't have to be a foot. Could also be 2-to-1 side slopes, which would fit within this area. And because the grade is between 0.5% and 1%, it's very flat. You really are just digging a slight shallow trench in this area to get from behind the proposed commercial building around the retaining wall out to the wetlands with another little tail coming out to the discharge point from the system under the parking lot. The flatter the wet soil is, the denser the vegetation will tend to be, the higher the water quality removal of nutrients will be. The systems as proposed do not do a great job for nutrient removal, as the system under this large parking lot is mostly in fill. There hasn't been infiltration testing there. And while I did, in my analysis for pollutant loading, account for the infiltration, we haven't had documentation, demonstrating what the rates are in that system. But it's a belt and suspenders approach to address nutrient removal, which in the November 14th letter that I wrote has all the data in there, which will show the nutrients are reduced between 6 and 11% for the 1 year rainfall event, or actually, excuse me, the water quality event, which is 1 inch of rain in 24 hours. So that's a small frequent rainfall event where most of the pollutant loads are. So that's where the swale is. It does not have to be as elaborate as what Matt has drawn out here. Maybe the limit of disturbance moves out a foot or two, but not much more than that. To address Eric's comments, the pollutant concentrations, surprisingly, from low density residential all the way up through industrial, are very consistent. They're all between about 0.25 and 0.38 milligrams per liter for phosphorus and 2.1 milligrams per liter for nitrogen, because about 40% of our nutrient loads come as atmospheric deposition during sunny days, during rainy days, and then gets washed off impervious surfaces. So the swale can fit within the limit of disturbance. It was proposed and recommended because the existing systems, while it will reduce metals and hydrocarbons and suspended solids, doesn't do much for nutrients. And we are discharging to a wetland, and that's a justification for the wet swale in that area.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question for
Sure.
Mr. Trinkas. Mr. Trinkas, could you talk a bit on your November 14th letter about point number 2, the post-development peak rates? That wasn't something that I'm particularly familiar with, but I see that you have quite a suggestion there.
Sure. Well, under the DEP manual and also the language in the Mansfield zoning regulations, there's a standard called a channel protection volume. And the primary hydraulic aspect of that is you take the post-development peak rate of runoff for a 2-year rainfall event and you throttle it back to 50% of the pre-development peak rate. So in simple terms, the applicant has, I think, 6.7 CFS going out towards its wetlands. And for to meet that standard, you'd reduce that to 3.2. And the reason you do that is if you can't necessarily infiltrate the water, you reduce the peak rate leaving the site, but you extend the flow duration that it goes out of the site, so it has less of an impact on downgrading wetlands and water courses. Higher runoff volumes from standard detention basins have been widely shown to, erode stream channels, and the eroded material then gets deposited downstream, and that's likely the result of the sediment delta in the pond that Eric alluded to earlier. But there's also the second standard, which is reduce that post-development peak rate from the 2-year storm to the peak rate of the 1-year storm. It's an or condition in the manual and in your regulations. I believe it, because we haven't proven infiltration here, that we should meet the more restrictive standard, but the regulation is an is an or, so that's kind of my opinion, the commission's call.
And if I could just interject, I believe that's something that we've reviewed with Jennifer Kaufman and Derek Delay. And because the regulations are written that we could meet either the 50% of the 2-year storm or match the 1-year storm, I believe it was Derek's opinion that we do meet the regulations because we do provide it and match the 1-year storm. So
If I
go ahead.
I think Derek said, yes, you do meet the regulations, but it isn't or. So they are, in my understanding, and we can get, I can get email, I can pull up Derek's email, but it was that the applicant is meeting the regulations, but there isn't either, there is an or, there's two ways to meet the regulation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Correct. There's two ways to meet the regulation, and we meet the regulation with regard to the latter, which is matching the 1 year.
Now, going back to the swale, I think if the applicant is willing to put in a swale, I don't think we need to belabor this subject anymore.
That's fine,
And-
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, that was really the only open issue, I believe, as we came into this hearing, is that swale. If your guidance is, yes, we want to see the swale, and that's the only open matter, then we can certainly have the engineers work on those details, and if what Matt's prepared and is too elaborate and can be pared down a bit to Mr. Trinkus's satisfaction, but still accommodate the flow that's coming out of there, then we can come back with that as a detail or, condition. We can certainly work that out between now and the next meeting.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, can we move on to the, is there any public comment that you know of, Jennifer?
I'm muted, sorry.
Okay,
I see a Thomas Scott. Is that part of the applicant team?
He's our architect. Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And then I see a, let's see, Michael Dion, who I believe is with BL, and right?
Yes.
And Megan Collins
Yep.
also with BL.
Megan Collins is a clerk of mine.
Okay, great.
My office.
Okay. All right. So I think
we have no public comment, right?
I'm not seeing any public comment. No, is
All right.
correct.
So is this something we want to leave open to accommodate?
I think you should leave it open so that the applicant, I mean, I do think that the agency may want to see this, and since you're most likely going to be keeping the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing open, it might button things up a little neater, but
Okay.
Dory, what?
Yeah, there's no harm in leaving it open, because as you said, we're
Right.
gonna have to leave open the planning and zoning portion of it. There's really just this one discrete issue. I mean, it is a technical issue. We could technically close the hearing and let the technical details be worked out and come back and show it to you, and then you could just vote on it. But I guess there's really no harm in leaving it open if you think that you're gonna wanna have any further input into the actual design. But I would think that the engineers will be able to work out the design pretty quickly on that, and we'll be able to get that buttoned up.
Okay, so let's
So-
leave it open, and we can move on. Well, then we need to, I need a motion to close, to continue.
You need
the hearing?
to adjourn the hearing
Adjourn, not
to,
close, adjourn.
to your December 5th meeting
Okay,
at 6 p.m. virtual. If you could make sure you have a time and date certain, that would be great, Mr. Chairman.
okay, all right. Would someone like to put that forward?
Mr. Chairman, this is Luann Cooley. I can put that forth. I'd make a motion to adjourn the hearing until December 5th at 6 p.m.
Moved by Cooley. Second by Plant. And all in favor? 1, 2, 3, I think I got 6. Yep, all and unanimous. Thank you very much. So under old business, the next thing would be old business, but if we're moving the hearing off, then we'll also,
Table that.
well,
Eh.
we'll kick that one can down the road too.
Yes, and we will need a written extension, Dory, for both. Yeah.
You're on mute, Dory.
I don't think you need a written extension. We did give you an extension for opening the public hearing, and now once the public hearing is open, we've got the 30
You're right. You're
days
right.
to close it. So
35
I think
days, yep.
I think
Yeah.
we're good with extensions for now.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you. Just want to
Okay,
make sure
Yep.
we're all good. Sorry about that.
Okay, so we have some receipt motions. Receipt of a permit for 497 Middle Turnpike.
Yes, and I
That
can,
sounds familiar. I think we've looked at that before.
yes, you
coming back.
have. Let me share my screen and I have a motion for you. There. Can you see that?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Oops, it said it should be moved to, sorry.
I'll put that forward.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Coursing moves to receive the application of CMC Stores SPV LLC for a permit to conduct regulated activities associated with a proposed multifamily residential community at 497 Middle Turnpike, Assessor's Parcel ID 8.14.19, and 4 parcels fronting on Cedar Swamp Road, Assessor's Parcel IDs 8.14.14-2, 8.14.14-3, 8.14.14-4, and 8.14.18. File W number 1613-2. Then number 2, refer the application to staff and the Conservation Commission. 3, authorize staff to engage the services of Land Tech to provide an independent review of the application pursuant to 8.6 of Mansfield Inland Wetlands Regulations. Fees incurred for this review will be the responsibility of the applicant, and a deposit in the amount of the estimated cost shall be received prior to issuance of a notice to proceed. 4, request that staff schedule a public hearing in accordance with statutory requirements.
Moved by Corsi,
Second,
second by DeVivo. Any discussion?
One thing, Mr. Chairman.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we did not do a request for proposals for this as you normally would because Land Tech provided the technical review for the last application. So I just wanted to point that out. Also, the public hearing most likely will be January 17th on this, but I am just keeping this open just in case there needs to be an extension once we go back and forth with peer reviewers. So I just wanted to let
Okay.
you know that.
All right. All in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That passed unanimously. We also have a very interesting other application to receive. King
Yes.
Hill Road. That's a new one.
Yes, it is.
All right, all we need to do is receive that tonight.
Well, I'm just let me give one, you do, before someone puts forth the motion, you did get proposals from 3 companies or 3 firms that are on your on-call list. The first one was it was Land Tech, who you've used before, CHA, who you've also used before. If you recall, they peer reviewed Eagleville Green, as well as an application a long time ago when I first became the inland wetlands agent. And then Trinkhouse Engineering also. CHA was the low bidder, just FYI.
Okay. But first we receive the, and then
All in one, yeah.
Right, we need to engage the services of blank, so we need to decide that. So any comments from the commission? I'd be willing to go with CHA. Any strong opinions about who to go with? Seeing none, let's make it CHA.
Mr. Chair, I can put this forward.
Okay, thank you.
I, Luann Cooley, move to receive the application of Will Husky Student House LLC for a permit to conduct regulated activities associated with a proposed multifamily residential community at 22 and 28 to 32 King Hill Road, assessors parcel IDs 15.33.3 and 15.33.4. And 2, refer the application to staff and the Conservation Commission. 3, authorize staff to engage the services of Clow Harbor Associates, CHA, to provide independent review of the application. Pursuant to 8.6 of Mansfield's Inland Wetlands Regulations, fees incurred for this review will be the responsibility of the applicant, and a deposit in the amount of the estimated cost shall be received prior to issuance of a notice to proceed. And number 4, request that staff schedule a public hearing in accordance with statutory requirements.
Moved by Cooley,
Second,
second by DeVivo. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. I think that's it for inland wetlands, right? Anything?
You have to adopt your meeting calendar for next year.
Okay. Luann, did you want to say something, Luann?
I did. I just briefly wanted to mention that I, and I think Sarah as well, also attended the CACUAC meeting, which was the in Connecticut Inland Wetlands and Conservation Commission Association meetings, which was terrific, had a lot of good information. And one important thing I think that was brought up was the few people who actually do the deep Inland Wetlands Commission training. It's a long training. It's about 8 hours long, but it's very thorough and very helpful, and gives a really terrific overview of what we are supposed to be doing in this commission. So I would just like to encourage anybody to do that training. I have not yet done it, but I'm hoping to do it soon.
Is that something?
And I don't know if
Can we do that online?
Yes, you
it's all
can.
online.
Okay.
I can send you the link, and
Okay.
it may count as some of your training that you're required to do per statute. We can look that up to see if that is the case.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it does, because it's specific to inland wetlands, and the training requirements are for planning and zoning commissions.
Okay, thanks.
But it's probably a good idea to be trained in both. I would guess. Okay, we have a calendar. Does everyone like the calendar?
It is the same calendar you've had for many years. So, and we have cross-checked it for conflicts with holidays. So I think we're
Okay.
good.
Someone like to put that forward?
I will. I move to accept the proposed calendar for 2023 regular meeting schedule for the planning and zoning
Moved by DeVivo for inland wetlands.
and inland wetlands. Oh,
Moved by DeVivo, second by
Of course, the seconds.
Katie Frattoni. And all in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We adopted it unanimously, and Inland Wetlands Agency is adjourned at 7:22. So we have Planning and Zoning Commission. Call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission of Mansfield, Connecticut at 7:23 p.m. Members present are Aho, Corsi, Cooley, DeVivo, Bertoni, and Plant. And we have minutes from November 2nd, which I think only 2 of us were there, right? John, so you better move and to adopt it.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to pull up the agenda.
Okay.
I make I move that we approve the agenda. No, the minutes from the last meeting.
Very good. Moved by DeVivo, seconded by Frattoni. All in favor? Those that can vote, unanimous, DeVivo, Aho, and Frattoni. Okay, We have another public hearing on the same topic. Do we need to go through the boilerplate again, Jennifer?
That's up to you.
Can we just say ditto?
Why don't I just do, just to be sure,
I'll
well,
just do a brief, okay, I'll open it and you do a brief.
I'll try to be brief. It's kind of a lot of information. I'll do the best I can.
Okay, so we're opening a public hearing regarding the permit application of CPH Mansfield LLC, applicant Champagne Toy Store LLC, and the members present are Aho, Accorsi, Cooley, DeVivo, Bertoni, and Plant. And the public hearing is opened at 7:25 p.m.
Okay, an abbreviated version of the public hearing script. A reminder to participants, including members of staff, make sure you state your name before speaking. There is a delay between the live stream and what you're hearing here due to transmission. For tonight's hearing, we are receiving relevant information about the proposed application from the public. We need to maintain order and decorum. If not, the agency reserves the right to adjourn the hearing to another date and time. If we have glitches due to the virtual format, we hope that you will be patient with us. The order of presentations will be the applicant, then the public will comment, first support, then opposition, then undetermined or request for additional information. When addressing the commission, please state your name and address for the record before beginning your comments. Limit your comments to the subject of the public hearing. Summarize your letters and reports as all information is distributed and read by the members. Direct all questions to the chair. Do not attempt to engage in dialogue with the members of the commission staff or any other parties to the hearing. Speak clearly for those so that we can all hear you. Commission members may ask questions of anyone providing testimony, but will not discuss the relative merits of the application until the hearing is closed. And a failure to abide by these policies and procedures may result in the muting of your microphone or dismissal from the hearing. To participate, you can call in by dialing 1-929-205-6099 and enter the meeting ID 834-2309-4831 and the following passcode 330794. So I will go ahead and read the public hearing notice. Oops, sorry. Very small. Okay, the following notices were published in the Willimantic Chronicle on November 10th, 2022 and November 17th, 2022. The Mansfield Planning and Zoning Commission will hold the following public hearing on Monday, November 21st, 2022 via web-based virtual meeting to hear comments regarding the following application. 6:10 p.m. Special permit application of CPH Mansfield LLC for a mixed-use development, automotive sales and services, office and restaurants, including one drive-through facility at 106 Stores Road, Assessor's Parcel ID 38.109.38, PZC file 882-3. No information from the public shall be received after the close of the public hearing. Additional information regarding this application is available in the planning office. Paul Aho, Chair, Luann Cooley, Secretary. And then I'll just go ahead and note items for the record. The first are all the applicant submittals, application forms and extensions, the site plan checklist, the low impact development checklist, and a butters list, a project narrative regarding sewer, a sewer capacity letter, and the applicant's grant of extension. The site plans revised to 8/26/2022, architectural drawings, site plans revised to 10/24/2022, traffic study dated August 22nd, a stormwater plan revised through 8/26/2022, stormwater management plan revised through 10/24/22, stormwater management plan revised to 11/11/2022. And then the applicant's responses to peer review comments, as well as peer review comments. So the applicant response to Derek Delay dated August 26, 2022. Applicant response to Stephen to Trinkhouse Engineering LLC dated 8/5/2022. Applicant response to Weston and Sampson regarding traffic and landscape dated 5/10/2022. Applicant response to Trinkhouse comments dated 10/24/2022. Weston and Sampson comments dated 9/30/2022. Applicant response to Weston and Sampson comments dated 10/24/2022. Weston and Sampson comments dated 11/2/2022. BL summary response dated 11/15/2022. Nutrient loading calculations dated 11/11/2022. An overall site plan sheet, and that was submitted on 11/11/2022. A detail sheet revised to 10/24. Erosion and control sheet notes. Flow sputter manhole calculation. Landscape sheet submitted 11/11/22. Stormwater routing diagram. Proposed stormwater HydroCAD summary dated 11/11/2022. And then you have communications from the traffic authority, and those are their draft minutes dated 10/26/2022. 11/9 letter from the Economic Development Commission related to this application, and 11/16/2022 Conservation Commission minutes. That's
Okay.
it.
Thank you. Thank you. So the applicant has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Dory Famagletti from Kahan, Kerensky, and Capicella, representing the applicant tonight. I have the same team with me that I identified during the wetlands public hearing. Matt Bruton is going to be doing the bulk of the presentation with me, but we also have architects, landscape architects, and other engineers here with us from BL in order to answer any questions that may arise. I'd like to just incorporate, if possible, all of the presentation that we had done during the wetlands hearing, rather than going through that again, and then now just picking up on zoning specific issues. Would that be acceptable?
Please.
Thank you. Okay, one thing that I will note is now that we're in the zoning section of it, we did send notice to abutters within 500 feet of the site, which is required by your zoning regulations. I have forwarded those green cards to Jennifer Kaufman. She has those to document that the notices went out. We also did notify a separate notification to the site immediately to our south, where we're doing proposed excavation within 50 feet of the property line. So there was another notice that we had to send to them. So those notification requirements have all been complied with. As was noted, you've got comments and review from the Traffic Authority, who we had a meeting with previously, and Economic Development Commission. Again, favorable, I believe, with some minor comments. So rather than completely reviewing the plans again, I think it would be appropriate for me to turn it over to Matt. The items that are, I think, zoning specific that I want to touch on and move forward with, I think we should talk a little bit more about traffic and internal site circulation. I know, Matt, you did touch on that, but maybe we can talk a little bit about that drive-through limited service window that's proposed with regard to the northerly-most leasable unit, which is a restaurant use. And as long as we're on that subject, you will probably, most of you will hopefully recall, we did a regulation amendment about a year or so ago that would allow for drive-through services associated with restaurants only in the PV1 zone at the moment. Again, we thought that zone was appropriate. It's located up by the Route 6 interchange on a much more automobile oriented section of town than pedestrian oriented, like you have down in the center of town, Stores Design District. So we thought the PV1 would be the appropriate place to go with it. You did approve that regulation amendment, like I said, about a year ago. We did provide definitions for both limited service and full service drive-through windows. The application before you is just involving a limited service drive-through window. And just to refresh your memories, what that means is it's a window where the customer just solely drives up to the window to pick up their food. They do not order on site. They order via a website app. And I don't believe they even pay on site. They pay online as well. So they will just be driving up to the window to pick up their order, which greatly decreases any queuing time and delay and stacking that we would require on site. So we'll talk a little bit about that, Matt, and I'd also then like to talk a little bit, maybe hear from the architect. I think from a zoning perspective, you'll want to know what the site is designed to look like. With that, we'll also maybe talk a little bit about the landscape architecture as well. So you want to start, Matt?
Sure, no problem. Let me just share my screen. Okay, again, for the record, my name is Matthew Bruton. I'm an engineer from BL Companies out of our Hartford office, 100 Constitution Plaza. I'll bring up here the overall site plan to kind of discuss site circulation related to the redevelopment. Just kind of hopefully repeat just a few things, but not too much. Let me just use my highlighter to help here. As I mentioned, obviously previously, we're at the request of the town, and we think it's a good idea adding the sidewalk along the frontage of the property. Again, this will extend over Champagne Motors and the new mixed-use development, and hopefully be a future connection for other redevelopment projects along the street as things continue, as there's nothing on McDonald's or Staples side. Again, we do show direct access to, I'm sorry, my highlighter isn't working at the moment, direct access to the front of both buildings, Champagne Motors and a mixed-use development, directly accessing through the handicap loading handicap spaces at the front of each building. In terms of the offsite improvements, as I mentioned, right, we're providing a forest leg to the intersection. There's currently a signalized intersection at Eastbrook Mall. So if you follow my mouse to the right-hand side here, there's an existing turn lane and 2 straight-through lanes. Those will continue. We're just modifying the stop bar location for a proposed crosswalk to link up our new frontage sidewalk to the other side of the road. On the left-hand side of the intersection, there is 2 through lanes, which will continue, but we're also going to be restriping to provide a left-hand turn lane into the property. That will obviously aid the new driveway location. So the existing Champagne Motors driveway, as you see today, will remain as is. Will be mainly dedicated to the staff and customers for Champagne Motors, with the new additional driveway mainly used for the mixed-use development. With that said, though, we do have interconnectivity between both halves of the site. As Dory has mentioned, it's going to stay under ownership. It's not, we're not subdividing or anything like that. So they still need to work functionality-wise between each other. So we do show in the rear here, if you can follow my mouse, a connection between the 2 sites, between the 2 individual parkings. These, the parking that we show stands for itself, right? Each business has enough adjacent around their proposed facility, but we do want the functionality between the two ends of the lot. We imagine obviously that employees, may be hungry or may have a dentist appointment and can come across to the side of the site. And same thinking, if there's someone waiting at the car dealership for their service to be done, they can frequent the other businesses either on site or through the sidewalks adjacent to the area. So we do think the functionality of a driveway connection is great here. I know frequently when I do these meetings in front of other commissions, we're always looking to combine driveways and combine functionalities, and so we think it's prudent to keep a connection between both sides of this lot. As mentioned, obviously, there's a pedestrian accessibility as well, mainly through the frontage sidewalk as well. If I zoom in, breathe in 1 second. Maybe I can't zoom. Not sure what's going on here. Well, if you can follow my mouse again, obviously for the pickup window, I think everyone's become more familiar with this type of operation since COVID. I know a lot of businesses have adopted pickup areas either at windows or within parking spaces. As Dory said, it's something that you order before and then you show up at a predetermined time to pick up. It's not a queue like a typical fast food restaurant where there's a squawk box, a menu board, anything like that. None of those devices are present on this plan. So circulation for the pickup window, as I mentioned, is the endpoint pickup here is on the north side of the building. So we do show obviously a driveway that wraps around the side and then to the rear to pick this up, and then it's one way, allows cars to then either park or exit the site. We do show 8 queue spaces, dedicated queue spaces. I think that's more than we'll ever need here, but wanted to show the length that we do have behind the building. We think it's more than adequate to supply these uses. Obviously, the other 2 uses do not have any drive-through window component, and we'll just be using the standard parking spaces. As I mentioned, this is a DOT road, so any modifications to the proposed driveway or any of the off-site improvements like the restriping or the sidewalk improvements, even since it's in the right of way, needs to go to DOT. We do need to get an encroachment permit to approve this work. They will review our plans, review our signal design plans, and as mentioned during COMCOM, and I'll mention it here as well, because our drainage does discharge, some of it does discharge to the state system, they'll also be reviewing that. That's a process that we have started the ball rolling on, but they won't make a final determination until they know that it's locally approved. So that's an ongoing thing that we've had a discussion with the peer reviewers about. In terms of landscaping, I'm just going to touch on that briefly again. Obviously, we have a full landscape plan, trees, shrubs, grasses that we think are complementary to the business uses and on at least on the Champaign side, greatly improve the existing site to make it aesthetically pleasing and comply with the regulations. We've worked a lot with the peer review engineer and landscape architect team to make sure that we have that adequately shown on the plans. We did recently increase the size of some of the landscape islands to match the interior landscaping requirement. We've also planted trees and shrubs adjacent to the islands that you can see on my mouse here and around the patio to shield view to any car that may be parked at the pickup window. I'll also point out that there is a retaining wall, if you can follow my mouse, between the 2 businesses here, which does have a fence on it as well from a safety perspective, but it also
Hey,
provides.
Matt, I can't even see your mouse. Is everyone else able to see any of that?
Oh, no. All right, hold on. Sorry.
I know you just referenced follow your mouse, but I don't think, at least I couldn't see it. I don't know if anyone else could.
I couldn't see it either,
Okay.
but I could
have to.
show on the map what you were doing.
Yeah, so.
Now we can
All
see
right, I
it.
see it now. We
Okay.
can see it.
Yeah, so there's a retaining wall between the north and south sides to deal with the grade change. So there is a fence on top of this wall as well. So that will also provide shielding and buffering from a direct view from people passing by, looking at a car parked at the window here. So we have been working with the peer review engineer in terms of landscaping and traffic to provide a site that's safe and in keeping with current standards, and obviously DOT will be the last and final say on the improvements related to their work. That's kind of a quick high-level overview of, I guess, traffic circulation and landscaping. I don't know if you want to have any questions there before we move to the architecture. And I can see if
I have a question which is probably a little bit off topic, but one thing I noticed is that there's a huge cable of electric service going into Champaign Motors, probably because of activities that were done in the past. Wouldn't that be a perfect place to put a quick charge station for electric cars?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we can certainly bring that up to the applicant. I don't believe at the moment Champaign Motors sells electric vehicles, but we can certainly talk to them about stubbing.
They will in the future.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, what we've typically seen with a lot of these new developments and redevelopments is placing the infrastructure in place. so that it can be stubbed up and charging stations can be applied when the business is ready to accept that, and they don't have to dig up concrete or pavement at a later date, whether that's 6 months from now or 2 years or 10 years from now. But point taken.
Any other questions for now? You'll have another chance.
Before we get into the architectural plans, perhaps I'll just mention, I have been working, Matt and I have been working with Jennifer Kaufman on trying to promptly respond to all of the peer review comments as they come in. We have, I think, provided some information to the most recent comments from Weston and Sampson with regard to traffic and landscaping. We do not have a comprehensive letter addressing it like we have to the prior reports we've gotten. We can certainly provide that. I think that we've gone through verbally some of those things this evening, and we will continue to, but we can certainly document the file with a written comprehensive response so we can get that on to your peer reviewers so they can, between now and the continued hearing, just say, yes, we have satisfactorily addressed their comments. And as Matt mentioned, a number of the comments coming from Weston and Sampson with regard to traffic are, please make sure you pass along these comments to DOT. And since we will have to review all this and get a permit from DOT, we will absolutely do that. We, as he mentioned, are already in preliminary discussions with them, but we will certainly pass comments along. Any off-site improvements with regard to striping, widening, what have you, on Route 195 obviously is within their jurisdiction, and they'll have the final say on it. But of course, they're going to want to hear the comments from the town's consulting staff, so we will share those. We won't have an answer on that, obviously, until after the close of the hearing, because they can't act on it until we have an approval from the town. I suppose if there was something that required a modification, we would always have to come back, but hopefully we'll come to an agreement as to what's included in the recommendations and where we go by the time we close the hearing. So hopefully that won't be necessary. But we will follow up with a comprehensive written response between now and then. So I guess maybe with that, do you think that we could review the architecturals?
Yes.
Matt, do we have a
I'll
share
share my
screen?
screen. Yeah, I'll share my screen for Mr. Scott here. So Scott, just let me know when and where you want to move, and I will do so.
Okay. Hello, my name is Thomas Scott. I'm a principal here at Scott Griffin Architects and the architect for the applicant. We have worked with the applicant to develop these schematic design drawings that are being presented here. We understand that the tenant mix is going to be 2 restaurants and a business use, most likely a dental office. We don't have specifics yet. So these are schematic drawings that reflect kind of where we think the design is going. We know that as tenants are brought on board and we have signed leases, we're going to have more specific branding elements that we'll probably be applying to the building. So this is kind of a generic palette right now, but one that I think gives a sense of the size of the building, the scale of the building, and the types of materials that will be used on the building. The building, as has been said before, is roughly 8,700 square feet. There's 3 tenants, 2 restaurant tenants, one with a drive-up pickup window. There's quite a bit of storefront glass along the facade facing Stores Road. The same with the office space. We've tried to introduce as much glass so that there's some visual connectivity to the activities inside the building. We will be introducing some hard materials on the facade, like possibly some thin brick, some metal panels, possibly some stonework, again, depending on who the tenants are, what their brand is, and how they like to present themselves to their customers. So there will be some slight modifications, but I think in general, the facade will be scaled out as you see it. The building is roughly 20 feet tall. There'll be parapets that'll be high enough that they'll conceal the rooftop equipment from the road. There'll be roof access from the back of the building. In general, we've also introduced some small seating areas out in front of the two restaurants. So we will have some tables, chairs, possibly some umbrellas, and some nice seating out there to go along with all the lush landscape that'll be installed. But in general, I think that's the basics for the design. It is going to evolve a little bit more. There is, right now, we show a lot of stucco elements on the building, but again, that can change and evolve as we move through the leasing process. So if there are any questions, I'll be on the call right to the end, and let me know.
You have a picture of what the car dealership would look like?
We do, but it wasn't ready when
Okay.
these materials were submitted. So we are working on that as well. In fact, obviously that has to go first because we need to get their building partially demolished so that we can make room for this building. So now there's a big rush for us to move that project forward, and we are working on it now. We do have some concept drawings that we can share with the board if that was something that you'd like to see. This view here is from across the major intersection, looking right across Stores Road. There will be some small retaining walls along the new sidewalks that are being installed, just to bring some scale elements along the walking paths. And of course, there'll be numerous trees along the edge as well, with a lush landscape around the site. But in general, that's kind of where we're at right now. I think it's going to continue to evolve, but this is conceptually where we're headed.
Have you thought about putting some solar energy on the roof? Electric rates are going up to 37 cents a kilowatt in January. Don't miss the opportunity to produce some power.
Yeah, we do have a flat roof, or intending to put a low slope roof on the building. There will be mechanical equipment. The restaurants will have additional equipment in the way of makeup air units, exhaust fans, and that sort of thing. So there will be some real estate up there. I'm not sure how much at this point until we get a little further into the design process and understand how much equipment we'll have on the roof. But we may be able to carve out some areas to introduce some solar panels if the client will entertain that. So that's a good point.
Any other comments or questions?
Okay, if there aren't, I could take you through a few other items I'd like to discuss. In looking through your regulations, there are a number of specific areas we've got to focus on. The first one I want to call to your attention is Article 6B under performance standards, item 4M, which deals with aquifer areas. And although we're not directly in an aquifer area, I've been advised by town staff that we are within 500 feet of an aquifer. And as such, there's some regulations within that subsection that we're supposed to look at. One thing that's compliant and is a good thing is we'll be connecting to public sewers. There will be no on-site waste disposal system. There can be no underground storage tanks, and I don't believe we have any proposed. And built into our stormwater management plan, which we submitted at the beginning with the application, we have notes in there as to how we're addressing snow and ice removal and limited use of fertilizers so that we can minimize any chance of groundwater contamination. So that shall be in your originally submitted application materials. Another section that we have to pay attention to in your regulations is Article 7, Section B, which is your common interest ownership section. And as I stated earlier, we are not subdividing this site. We are planning to have a condominium here, a non-residential condominium. So there will be 2 units, unit 1 being the new building, unit 2 being the modified dealership building. We will have to provide documentation regarding the maintenance of the common features, such as driveways, utilities, landscaped areas, and things of that nature. The filing of a full condominium declaration isn't required statutorily because this is a non-residential condominium, but we will still have to separately file a documentation separately defining the units for separate ownership and also then establishing each owner's maintenance obligations. So we could certainly, as a condition of approval, share those documents in advance of recording and finalizing and recording as a condition of approval if you see fit. Article 10 has a number of sections that we need to look at in connection with this development. 10A just generally applies to all special design districts, of which the PB1 is a special design district. It requires the submission of architectural plans with any application for a site plan or special permit, which we've just reviewed with you. And those architectural plans are required to address the standards in section R of Article 10. And that section really talks about preserving natural features, which I believe during the wetlands hearing, we talked at length about the preservation of the wetlands and maintenance of a satisfactory upland buffer in order to protect the wetlands. The architecturals also have to address the mass and scale of the new buildings to make sure it's compatible with the surrounding properties. And I think that what we've just demonstrated with Mr. Scott shows that. The building setbacks, here it requires the building setbacks to respect the prevailing setbacks on the surrounding properties. It talks about, well, if there's parking in the front yards, what are those front yard setbacks, and also extending sidewalks. We did mention that we will be the only property on the east side of the road directly abutting north and south. There are no sidewalks there, but we'll be the only property adding them at this point, but maybe that'll be the impetus for other extensions in the future. When we talk about building setbacks, we're going to get a little bit into that when I get into a later section also, but when you look at the McDonald's, that has parking in the front of the building as well and is set back. Let me just see if I can find a number. McDonald's, I believe, is set back approximately 42 feet from the street line.
Matt, would you mind sharing there was an aerial photo that kind of shows, that would be terrific. I think.
Actually, that's good and helpful because you can see as we start with McDonald's and then slowly work up to the Staples Plaza, the stepping back of the building frontages. So let's wait till we get there.
1 second, sorry. My computer's taking its sweet time. Hold on.
I don't think it was in the plan
20.
set.
Yeah, I think it's the Google.
Yeah, the
image.
Google one. Yeah.
Yeah, hold on 1 second here.
While you're looking for that, have you reached out to the neighbors about the question of the sidewalk? Because we do have an example in Four Corners where 2 different neighbors talked to each other about connecting a sidewalk. Obviously you don't have any, you can't force the others to put a sidewalk in, but you might want to reach out to them and show them where your sidewalk ends, and maybe they would voluntarily consider putting a sidewalk in.
I think that was the case. The reason that is happening in the Four Corners area is because both properties are being developed.
Okay, well, but
So-
an existing property, you
Yeah.
can also talk to an existing property owner. McDonald's would need a very short sidewalk to connect those 2.
I'm not sure that we have reached out to them yet, but I can certainly mention that to the client. And as you know, we have no control over whether or not they do, but or are willing to extend their sidewalks and connect into ours. But even if they're not now, maybe once they see it developed, they'll see some reason for doing it at that point, and they'll just say it makes natural extension, and maybe it'll provide some interconnectivity to their developments and projects as well, and cross-pollinate each other.
Sure. Yeah.
So thank you, Matt, for putting this on the screen. So as you can see, when we're talking about respecting the building setbacks that are prevailing, McDonald's is set back about 42 feet from the road line. The existing Champagne Motors building and the portion that'll be staying, I believe, is set back around 89 to 90 feet. On the proposed setback that we're the setback we're proposing for the new building is 150 feet. And then as we get up to the Staples Plaza, that's at about 170 feet back from the road. So it's kind of an incremental and gradual increase of setback as we work our way from McDonald's up towards the Staples Plaza. So I do believe that we are respecting and consistent with the prevailing setbacks on the surrounding properties. Also in the special design districts, we're supposed to pay particular attention to vehicular and pedestrian safety and accessibility. I think that we discussed that at length when we showed you the site layout with our traffic circulation, our points of ingress and egress, and our pedestrian connections to the sidewalk and from the sidewalk to each of the respective buildings, both the modified car dealership as well as the new proposed building. We've provided, I believe, ample screening and ample landscaping as we've talked about through the course of our presentation, not just to complement the building, but also to break up the parking areas, to screen the drive-through lane, and also to screen the overall development from the residential uses to the east. We talked about the buffer we're maintaining there and the additional landscaping and the fence that we're putting in order to have that buffer. We're required to pay particular attention to the road and driveway system to make sure we're minimizing impacts on surrounding traffic. We've gone through our traffic study. Weston and Sampson has reviewed that. Again, I think we're pretty close to agreement on all points there, just with that final follow-up letter they're waiting on from us. So hopefully we'll have their final approval and consensus for the next meeting. Let's see. We do have a significant undisturbed buffer being maintained between the developed portions of the site, and not only the wetlands, but also the residential uses to the east. Again, as I referenced, the landscaping and fencing along there. And these are all I'm just taking out of criteria for an application and approval in a special design district from that article that I referenced. Moving on, in Article 10, now to subsection H, which deals with excavation. There are some specific application requirements and criteria that you need to review there as well. Matt, I might need you to chime in a little bit here, and if we don't have the specifics on it, then we're going to also, at Jennifer's request in her memo, is provide a narrative as to full compliance with this section as well. But we're just in excess of 15,000 cubic yards of fill that's going to be brought to the site. And we're going to be relocating about 300 cubic yards or so on site as part of our site development plans. All excavation on this site is solely for the purpose of readying the site for construction of the new mixed use building. We don't anticipate any processing on site or sales of material on site. It's really just to ready the site for development. We anticipate construction to take between 8 and 12 months to get through the full completion of construction. Any hauling associated with the excavation and bringing material on will be compliant with your regulations and be conducted between Monday and Friday from 7 to 7. That's what your regulations set forth as requirements. As I mentioned, there'll be no processing of materials on site. And in our response to Jennifer, we can talk a little bit more about the truck access to and from the site and the stockpile areas and erosion controls. Those are all sections of your regulation that require addressing. So we'll put that all in the narrative so Jennifer can review that to assure compliance with this section of the regulations as well for when we come back next meeting. And then picking up on drive-through facilities, again, that limited drive-through facility, there are just two items that we need to talk about here. In Article 10, Section 10, which is that newly adopted regulation that we worked on about a year or so ago, again, with this site in mind, there were a couple of provisions in there that allowed for waivers of other provisions of the sections of the regulation. And one has to do with, if you recall, in the PB1, we have a maximum front yard setback of 20 feet. Now, so that's talking about pulling the building closer to the street line as opposed to having it set back. But so that's the standard in the PB1. However, as you can see, and as I already detailed for you, the other properties surrounding are non-compliant because the McDonald's, the existing dealership, and the Staples are much further setback. And then if you look across the other side of the road to the Eastbrook Mall, you'll see that that's exorbitantly set back compared to what we're talking about with the parking in front. But the new section of the regulations does allow for an elimination of the maximum front yard setback in order to accommodate a drive-through service. And that's because when you're doing a drive-through lane, you do really need to wrap it around the building in order to get it safely in and safely out and have the least interference with pedestrian movement and other parking movements and driving movements within the site. So if we meet certain criteria, you can waive that maximum front yard setback. And criteria number one, again, is to accommodate the drive-through facility. Number two is to provide, you can waive it if it'll provide for a safe traffic circulation around the building, which is necessary in order to accommodate that drive-through aisle. You can also waive it. Another criteria is you have to look again at, is it consistent with the front yard setback on neighboring properties, which I already discussed with you with regard to the other properties. Here we're proposing the new building to be about 150 feet off from the road, which is in between the setback between McDonald's and stepping up to this greater setback on Staples. And then we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we still want to encourage pedestrians to utilize the site and make it as friendly as possible to pedestrian use. So there are other amenities that you can look at requiring in order to offset that increase in the maximum front yard setback. So we're looking at things that will activate the streetscape and provide pedestrian accessibility, which I think the plan incorporates, such as the outdoor dining patios, which we've identified for both of the restaurant uses. You could see them a little bit better in the architectural plans, but you can see them also on this site plan here. There's a proposed patio in front of each of the restaurants. We also have the extension of sidewalks along the full length of the frontage, which will be a nice addition and a step forward to making this a more pedestrian accessible area. We've got clearly defined pedestrian walkways from the sidewalks to the front of each building, which I believe Matt's highlighter is working again now, and he's highlighting for you right there. And we also provided a bike rack for the new building. So there's a bike rack in there for any bikers who want to come. And if they're not just walkers, but also bicycle riders. And then we beefed up the landscaping of the street frontage by showing that attractive retaining wall and stone wall along the front and the additional streetscape plantings, street trees namely, that we're providing there. All of those are elements that activate the streetscape, that encourage pedestrian movements here, and are a basis for granting the waiver of the maximum front yard setback, which really is the only way to make this development work with the drive-through as we're proposing right here, is to allow for that elimination of the maximum front yard setback. The second section under Article 10, Section X of the drive-through facilities regulations is has to do with parking in the front of the property. Now, another section in Article 10 talks about encouraging where possible parking to the side and rear. But then you also have that section which we talked about, which also talked about respecting the existing setbacks along the street. So there's a little bit of a conflict there. So, you know, the existing parking for our neighbors are primarily in the front of the building. So we are consistent with that. But under this specific Article 10, Section X, you do have the ability, if you deem it necessary, to waive the requirement of parking in the front of the building, even though I suggest it's really just a suggestion and guideline. It's not an absolute mandatory that it has to be to the side and rear. But if you feel necessary to waive any potential conflict in the regulation that encourages parking to the side and rear rather than in front. You have the flexibility to do that as long as you find that the parking in the front is consistent with the neighboring properties, which we've clearly reviewed with regard to McDonald's,
let
Staples,
me,
and across the street.
Let me stop you right there because I have a rule where we get a break every 2 hours.
Oh, okay, you know, I was pretty much done anyway.
This doesn't seem to be ending.
Yeah, I just had one last comment to make if I could, and then I was done with what I wanted to
Right.
put on the record for tonight. And the only other potential waiver that we're looking for in the regulations, other than the front yard setback maximum and the parking in the front, is the reduction of drive aisle width, which on unit 1, which is the new proposed building, solely in areas where there's one-way traffic proposed, we're proposing to reduce the drive aisle to between 14 and 18 feet, down from 24 feet, but again, solely where there's one-way traffic. Your regulations do allow for that in your discretion, particularly when there is a one-way traffic, and as long as you find that there'll be safe traffic flow. So those are the 3 waiver sections that we're looking at you to consider. But again, there's really nothing that we're going to have you encourage you to act on tonight. We know we have to leave it open because of the wetlands matter, and also so we can get those final written comments over to your peer reviewers and to Jennifer.
So thank you.
That's all I've got for now.
Jennifer, would this be a good moment to take a break?
Why don't you move to continue the public hearing
Okay,
to
and then-
December 5th, and then at
Okay.
6:10 p.m.
Okay, would someone like to put forward said motion?
I would like to move that we no, we're not closing.
Continue.
Continue.
We're continuing this public hearing until December 5th at 6:15 p.m.
So why don't you say 6:10, just in case?
6:10
Yeah.
p.m.
Moved by DeVivo. Second,
So you're moving to continue this public hearing to
Public hearing.
December 5th, 2022 at 6:10 p.m. via virtual meeting.
right, okay, moved by DeVivo, second by Tony. All in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. And we have a 5-minute break.
See you back at 8:16.
Jennifer, are you going to make a comment about the accessory dwelling unit?
Yes,
Okay, all right. I'll let you explain what happened.
sure.
Thank you, Paul, for giving us a break.
Yeah, yeah, I figured 2 hours is usually enough. Your Fitbit is going to tell you, stand up, stand up.
End up. I like Katie's doors. I know that seems like a strange thing to, but it's almost like when I'm breaking, she closes the doors.
Right. All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, we're all gathered back together again. And under old business, we have that special permit application, which is tabled. And then we have the matter of the accessory dwelling units, which was brought before the town council. And
Correct.
Jennifer will explain what happened when that arrived at the town council.
So the town council is concerned that we're sending a message. I think they're concerned that we're sending a message that we're not promoting affordability. So they had asked that Paul and Kevin Deneen attend the meeting on November 28th. So we've invited Kevin Deneen and Paul to kind of answer questions. They're also concerned about parking. I think that they were wondering why we are choosing to opt out about parking. I did the best I could to explain that I think that it's something that you all, what I heard from you is that you want to study it. And maybe it is that a one size fits all is not appropriate. Although I did convey that you have always wanted to look towards having parking minimums. So I did convey all of that. They just had some questions and concerns. Kevin Deneen will be attending. I think one of the things that I've heard from Kevin Deneen is that this opt-out is you get an accessory dwelling unit as of right, which means that unless you affirmatively act out via a 2/3 vote from both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Town Council, someone could get an accessory dwelling unit as of right, provided they meet the setbacks. I think they're required to meet the setbacks, and then public health code and building code, obviously. So my understanding is that as of right makes it so that if that we can't, we just sort of allow them to do this, to apply for the setbacks. If they meet that setbacks, we can put no other additional conditions on that zoning permit. That is what as of right it means. And I think folks are struggling with that. That's what Kevin and I verbally discussed. So all to say, we will, I did forward you on November 14th, the meeting information, or I had Tasha forward you the meeting information. And I think it would be good for you to just listen in. And I'm not sure, but Paul is definitely committed to attending in person, right?
I think we have to be careful because this is unusual when two boards have to agree on something. So I think all I can do is explain why we did what we did, and it's really their decision. It's not my role to say how they should vote, and it's not their role to say how we should vote.
Correct.
Yeah, Luann.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity to explain how and why we have the rules that we do in place at the moment and how they interact with what this new legislation is. I think it might be really helpful if we could provide them with some data. People love numbers, to show how many accessory dwelling units have been approved in Mansfield since our regulations went through, so that we can show that this is an effective policy that is allowing for ADUs to happen in the town. It's not simply, making a barrier to them. But I think they will understand the particular challenges of having an ADU regulation in a town like ours, with a population like ours associated with the university, that adds a different kind of challenge than most towns have. And I think we've done a really good job of crafting our regulations so that it does allow for this with specific conditions to try to avoid some of the problems that we do get with excessive rentals with college students, et cetera, et cetera. So
I will do my best to convey that to the council. Their primary objection was, why should we be more restrictive than all the towns around us? That's sort of the sticking point with them.
yeah, I totally get that, but they've also approved all kinds of different
Yep.
ways that we have used zoning to try to regulate the kind of excessive problems that we have in neighborhoods with a lot of college rentals. And I think that they will appreciate the balance that we have to strike with that. And I think especially showing them data that we have had quite a few of these approved would be helpful. I mean, because I know in our neighborhood, Paul, we've had at least 3, which is, you know, can show that this is a useful thing that's happening. And am I right about that, Jennifer? In the last
Jolene would be the one. I was surprised that we didn't have more approved, actually.
So,
yeah.
So I looked at this. So we, since 2020, which is when we made the changes that we've made, we've approved 7.
Okay.
Two are pending that I have not approved yet, and 2 are currently under construction. So it is working, you know. We're approving them regularly. I don't know what the pandemic may or may not have affected our numbers, but it is working. People are doing it. And for the reasons that we thought they would, you know, for aging in place and all of those things that we talked about when we made the changes.
Well, I will do my best to present how we feel about it, and then it's really up to them. And it has to be a 2/3 vote.
Yeah, it is interesting because this is something normally that only planning and zoning commissions would do, right? And I was like, but it's the legislature clearly wanted this two-fold vote, probably just to really make sure that
discussion.
People were really comfortable, that people understood what the implications were of these regulations. So yeah.
Do we have a sense of how many other communities in the state have ADU regulations before this legislation went into effect? Because we were one of the few, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a sense of that. I do know that what's happening is there's a lot of press and lists about who are the communities that are opting out, and we're on that list. And I think
Desegregate Connecticut is putting out emails telling people to go to their local planning and zoning commission. And talk about it. So
since we can opt out anytime we want from the parking, it might be a good strategy for us to say, you know, go ahead and don't opt out of the parking.
But you have a lot of big developments. I mean, more than you've ever had. I think you might now.
We can opt out anytime we want.
Correct, but you have. I'm just
thinking of trying to throw the town council a bone.
No, don't think like
that.
That's no, this is not a negotiation like that. No, I would say that one of the points that we can. Well, no, I would say, Paul, actually, one of the points that we can make pretty strongly is that Mansfield has one of the most progressive zoning regulations in the state. And I think that we are doing well with that, and that we are having to craft our regulations in a way that most other towns do not have to do to take account of our unusual population. And I think that's valid, you know, and I think that the idea of having an opt-out system for AUDs is a really good idea to get communities thinking about the process and trying to get more of this kind of really simple, low-hanging fruit, affordable housing happening in the state. Housing is an issue. Affordable housing is a big issue in the state. And I completely support that. I just think that we're in a very strange situation, especially since we already have solid regulations in place that are working. So most towns don't.
I also think that there's a misnomer that ADUs will make more affordable housing in Mansfield, and I would argue that it's probably I think the way we've implemented it, it is making housing more affordable. If we take that opt out, that's gone.
Yep.
Completely gone.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. I'll make the case. Hopefully we can get a 2/3 vote there. Okay, we have a map amendment application to receive.
Yes, and right. I did not put your motion, Jolene, for the bond release, but we'll deal with that. Let me share my screen. There we go.
Okay, would someone like to put that?
I can do that one.
Okay, thank you.
Accorsi moves to receive the zoning map amendment application of BPOZ 1750 Stores LLC, applicants owners, for property located on the north side of Stores Road, immediately west of Timber Drive, assessors parcel ID 2.5.22, PZC file 1377, and to schedule a public hearing in accordance with statutory requirements.
Moved by Accorsi.
I'll second for
Second by-
Tony.
Second by Tony. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. We have a bond release also we should talk about.
Yes, Jolene, do you want to give a brief overview of that?
Yeah, so I can share my screen because the motion is on here for you guys. Okay. So this is with regard to the Solvay subdivision on North Windham Road. In 2013, BZC approved a 3-lot subdivision with a common driveway. One of the conditions was the common driveway had to be completed prior to the sale of any of the lots. So $8,500 bond was posted. One of the lots, lot 2, has been sold and a house has been built on it. So we inspected the driveway and it appears to be built per the plan. So the owner's requesting a release of the bond.
Okay. Someone like to put that forward? Dorian, here's your last chance. Go ahead.
To authorize the release of the 8,500 performance bond for the Suave subdivision, PZC file number 1311, based on the finding that the common driveway has been installed pursuant to the approved subdivision plans dated December 21st, 2012.
Moved by Plant, second by
Second.
DeVivo. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. We have a meeting calendar to adopt.
I will make a motion to, it's the same calendar. I make a move to adopt the 2023 meeting calendar as presented.
Moved by DeVivo,
Plant seconds.
second by Plant. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Now, the reason why this was Dorian Plant's last opportunity to make a motion is that she's decided to leave us. Oh, we're sorry to see you go.
I'm sorry to leave.
I've enjoyed working
I've
with
just had too many personal commitments.
you. Yeah,
I will sadly miss all of you.
I enjoyed working with you and I enjoyed working with your husband. It was memorable. I think I'm the only one present here because Binu's not here. But it was memorable the day that your husband shot down a lawyer who was threatening Mansfield. And just, he sent him scurrying back to Hartford with his tail between his legs. It was one of the most memorable moments on the planning and zoning.
I remember that.
It was really nice to have you kind of take his, follow in his footsteps. It was really nice to have the plant legacy on planning and zoning and inland wetlands.
Well, I'm sorry to be leaving, but I'll remember all y'all. Watch your meetings.
Okay. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And you can't get away from me, Doreen. I know where you live.
I know.
Okay. We have, Luann went to a regional planning commission meeting, right? Have I got that
Yes.
correct? Yes. Tell us about it.
Yes, yeah, so this is marvelous. I actually remember to go to the CROG Regional Planning Commission meeting. And I'll be honest, I only remembered when it was because my colleagues at Circa, where I work, were presenting the Resilient Connecticut 2.0 initiative. So Circa, where I work, is the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation. We have received quite a bit of money from the state to expand our work. Originally, it was just in Fairfield and New Haven counties, and now it's throughout the state. And they're going cog by cog to work with the towns in those cogs on developing a climate vulnerability assessment of the town. They'll be talking with us, they'll be talking with Jennifer's office and the town engineers to look at the town and assess what our needs are for making the town more resilient to the changes of climate change. And as part of that, they'll be helping us to figure out what our priorities should be. So we'll be in a good place to apply for some of this marvelous state and federal funding to get some of the things done that we need to do. Some of the things they've helped other towns do are look at areas where they may have flooding issues, come up with a plan for how to address that. They've helped towns come up with transportation-oriented development planning and other things like that. So Mansfield's in, I would think, fairly good shape, but I know we have some culvert issues in various places that this may be a very big help for. So we'll look for Dave Murphy, who the town I know has worked with before. He's an engineer who's now working with Circa to knock on our door and come talk to us at some point. The other towns that also showed up at the Regional Planning Commission, there were only, I think, 7 towns that showed up, talked a little bit about the different issues that they're facing. A lot of towns are still working on their cannabis regulations, and those are coming along. There really wasn't any big thing that's happening in the other than the Resilient Connecticut initiative that I can remember that came up at the meeting. So they'll have another one in just a few months, which I will do my best to remember to actually attend.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
With that, I believe we are done. Is there anything else, Jennifer, we need to do? No? Okay.
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Goodbye, Dorian, and we are adjourned at 8:34 p.m.
Thank you.